Haven. And do I call you Haven? Do I call you by your real name?
With S. So
Havens.
Plural, yeah.
Okay, so which name do I call you? Because where do you get a name Havens from? Because that's not your actual name.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to have a guy's sort of like a moniker to put out music under, because I think when you have a name, people immediately, first of all, they know you're, like in my case, if I put music out under Andrew Begg, they know I'm male, and they start thinking, oh, what's this person? They get an image in their head, whereas if it's just Havens, the music kind of speaks for itself, and it's very ambiguous, and I kind of wanted something that, left people to focus just on the music. So there's been a few artists who I admire who use a guise or some kind of a moniker or pseudonym to put out their music under, and I thought that's kind of what I wanted to try with this, so that's why Havens.
Okay, because my thought was Virginia to Vegas does the same thing too.
Yeah, a lot of people have. So, it's worked for a few people. Like The is probably the biggest example. Matt Johnson, who's a great songwriter. And I mean, it's been him, but people think of them as a band / some kind of entity, and it just, it works. So that's kind of what I was going for.
So I'm going to go with Havens. So let me just say this, Havens, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. Thank you so much for the great music too, man. And more importantly, thanks for representing Toronto in this sort of pop rock scene that you're doing, my friend. How does it feel, first off, how does it feel getting some new music out there?
Yeah, well, thanks for the kind words, first of all. And it feels great. Like, this is kind of the third release so far. So I had an EP in 2017. I had another single back in May called Peace and Darkness. And then this one, Fall, is the most current release, obviously, and it feels great. This is probably my strongest work so far, I think, so I'm really, really happy with it, and I'm having a lot of fun promoting it and playing it live, and we got a great music video for it, so all that's awesome.
Well, let's get a little bit of the history, because I did mention Torontonian. You kind of grew up where I was in the clubs partying, the 80s scene. What was it like for you growing up, man, and watching these artists and the birth of video? Because you were really young when that was going on.
Well, I was born in 93, so I wasn't around in the 80s.
Oh, 93?
Yeah. So my parents were kind of how I experienced the 80s, because that was their generation. So I really got to experience like all the best 80s music just from them playing it in the house. So they were always playing Duran Duran, The Cure, The Smiths, The Police, I could go on and on, Depeche Mode, New Order, like all these great bands, and so somehow all of that kind of like made its way into my music, and you hear a lot of those 80s influences, but I listen to so much music, man, like 50s, 60s, 70s, even going back earlier, 40s music, like 90s current music. I love it all, and it ended up being kind of alternative rock that I ended up settling with, but yeah, the 80s definitely is a big inspiration for me musically, for sure. I think it was an amazing and magical decade for music.
Okay, now I read off of your bio about, one of the first videos I think maybe you saw, remember, was Michael Jackson's Thriller, am I right? Can you talk about that, especially because we're leading up to Halloween? I can remember rushing home because it was like, oh, you got to watch this thing, and then 4 o'clock, boom, it was there, and people were just like, wow, this was amazing. What was it like for you, young, and seeing this, again, with the influence from your parents?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I was 8, and I remember it was around Halloween, so it was around this time back in 2001, I guess it would have been. And I remember just on TV, much music, or much more music as it was back then. They played the Thriller video, and I remember just watching it and just being like, my jaw dropped, and I was just like glued to the screen, and I was like, what is this? Who is this? And my parents were like, oh, this is Michael Jackson. This was our generation. Like, we used to listen to this stuff. And I remember just being 8 years old and being like, wow. And, the next thing you knew, I had a pile of his CDs. I was kind of rolling up the sleeves on my jacket and, kind of trying to dance like him a little bit. And, I was big into Michael Jackson for years, and I was pretty obsessed as a kid. So, it wasn't long until I started listening to more music, and then I discovered kind of the White Stripes was probably my first like rock influence, Jack White, and that kind of moved me more into the rock and guitar side of things. But what really kicked it off for me, wanting to be in music and just being obsessed with music and just having that kind of really emotional effect on me, was Michael Jackson and the Thriller video.
But you talked about Depeche Mode, Jack White, those kind of things too. But how did you know that you were going to get into music? Where was that part of you? It's one thing listening to it. It could be another thing you're DJing it, but it's another thing when now you're going to create music, and now these guys have become sort of like the guys who have opened up the door for you to do this.
Yeah, I guess it happened when I started playing guitar when I was around 13, almost 14. That's when I got my first guitar and started taking some private lessons. And at that point, I kind of decided that, I really like this. I love this instrument, and I just kind of started singing and just writing. It just kind of flowed, it just was very natural for me. And I wasn't surprised because I kind of thought that might happen when I picked up a guitar. I was like, I want to start a band. I want to put out music. I want to play with my friends and play shows. So there's a little bit of that in mind, but I wasn't sure if I could do it. But then it just seemed to flow throughout high school. And then, I went to college for music as well, and played in various bands with different formations. And then Havens formed in kind of like mid-2016. We started recording, and then live started happening in 2017, and here we are now in 2018.
I know we already talked about the Havens name, but specifically, where did it actually come from? Did you look it up on a dictionary? Did it just pop out?
Yeah, it was actually, I made a list of names that I wanted to use, so there was a whole bunch, and Havens at the time, in like late 2016, was the only name that hadn't been taken yet. So that's really all it is. I just liked the name, and it wasn't in use. So I just online, there was like one random guy who put out this little EP for his wife that he was called Havens. I'm like, okay, I think I can get away with this. He doesn't look like he's trying to make like, national albums or anything. So technically I wasn't the very first, but nobody else at the time had that name. Now, unfortunately, a year later, 2 or 3 other people have popped up using the Havens name, but I can say that I was the first with like a major kind of release with it. So I'm hoping I can keep this name, but we'll see. I mean, things happen. You've probably heard about it before where people aren't allowed to use names, but fingers crossed I can keep it because I think it suits the genre. I think it speaks to something that's euphoric and uplifting and a little bit ambiguous, so I like it. It's a good name.
We talked musically, where the influence come from. Lyrically, though, what kind of stories do you like to tell?
For me, when it comes to lyrics, I always just say that I want to tell honest stories about love and life. So for me, it's just speaking from the heart and talking about my own life and the lives of those around me and a little bit of the world, and just trying to be honest and connect with people. My biggest lyrical influence is probably Morrissey from the Smiths. So I think there's probably some parallels, some similarities with some of the themes I write about with what he has written about. So yeah, but there's probably tons of lyricists I could rattle off that I like. But generally, I try and talk about love and life from the heart.
Now, when it comes to producing music and stuff, a certain member of the Arkells is involved with all this too.
Yeah, Mr. Tim Oxford from the Arkells, yeah, fantastic drummer, and the Arkells are one of my favorite modern day bands.
Oh yeah, especially the music they got going on right now, amazing. It blows my mind with it.
Yeah, they keep putting out good records, and I got into them in 2011. I was 17 at the time, so yeah, really been into them for quite a long time, and it was, the way that happened is my producer, Ian Madden, he is a longtime friend of Tim's, worked with him a lot in the past, and they've recorded together, and they were even in a band together even before the Arkells. And so he told me, he goes, if you love the Arkells so much, he goes, I'm friends with Tim, the drummer. I could see if he could maybe, be up for playing on your music. And so that didn't take me long to think about that. I was like, yeah, that sounds like that could be good. So we asked him, and he ended up being nice enough to want to work on the project, and he's been very complimentary, and his playing is epic. So yeah, it's awesome.
Now the new single is called again?
Fall.
Fall. What is it about? I mean, it's fall now, but still, I don't think I would assume it has something to do with relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're on the right track for sure. So it's nice that it ties into the season. So I'm glad that we've got somewhat of a double entendre there, I suppose. But yeah, the last single I put out, Peace in Darkness, that was about love when you have it, when you're in the moment, when it's good, and about cherishing it and holding on to the memories of it. Fall now is a little bit about when you're searching for love and when you're in that longingness state and you're not sure if it's going to come, and you're waiting kind of patiently, and there's that sense of, there's a monotony here, like will I ever find the real thing, sort of. I think a lot of people can relate to that these days. So that's kind of what Fall is about, and the next single is going to examine love from a different standpoint. So the idea is that I'm putting out 3 singles. It's a trilogy of singles that examine love from 3 different standpoints. Yeah.
Amazing. Will there be an EP or an album following up somewhere in 2018 or 2019?
Probably not that soon, but definitely in the future, near future, I definitely hope to put out a full-length album. But right now the plan is singles. That seems to be what works with this marketplace these days. It gets people's attention, and I like it because then I don't have to spend a year working on an album and then put it out, and who knows whether it's going to get listened to entirely by people. So this way, it's like I put out one single, put all my energy into that, boom, that's out, and then a few months later, I don't have to take forever to put out more music. I can just, 3 months later, 4 months later, put out another single, and then that gets more attention. So we're gonna keep going with that for the time being, I think.
What about shows?
Shows, we gig about once or twice a month locally in Toronto. I hope to do a tour sometime in the summer, hopefully. So, yeah, right now we've got a show tomorrow. Actually, we're playing at Sunrise Records. It's an in-store acoustic performance, so we're hoping to get some people out for that.
I'm sorry, which Sunrise Records? And thank God for Sunrise for doing what they're doing these days, man.
Yeah, they're wicked. They're like the last true record store chain. So yeah, they're awesome guys. It's at the Sherway Sunrise Records location in Sherway Gardens Mall. So yeah, that's going to be tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And then after that, we're going to take a little bit of a break for the holidays from live shows, but we do have the music video for fall coming out, which I'm very, very excited about, so we're going to be promoting that. And then in January, we'll be back with more shows.
Looking forward to it, man. Social media, website, Twitter, all that stuff, where do we go to follow you?
Everything's at Music by Havens. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Music by Havens, or go to musicbyhavens.com.
Fantastic. Havens, great meeting you, my friend. Looking forward to talking to you for the last part of the trilogy and seeing what else is going on with you 2018 and coming up into 2019.
Anytime. Thank you, Rudy.